It's easy. The least would be Saudi Arabia. I mean, you know, I spent 2.5 years deployed to different places in the Middle East, so I mean, I'm not a favorite of all of them, but obviously Saudi Arabia is not my favorite because of just their whole culture, their 9th century way of doing business. It just would never want to go back there. I was ordered there. I would go back if I was ordered, but I wouldn't want to go back there. But I most want to go back to, I mean, I've been all over countries, obviously in Europe, all over Africa and Asia. I went to this place called the Seychelles in my last job, where I was actually leading a contingent to try and work with them in order to station some assets there in order to fight counterterrorism, piracy in Africa. And man, what a wonderful place that is. I mean, that is like an oasis out there that's yet to be discovered. Incredible islands off the east coast of Africa in the Indian Ocean, the islands of the Seychelles.
Nice.
Yeah, you should invest there. It's a great place. I'd love to go back.
All right, Dave, where would you go? Where would you not go? Where would you go?
It's interesting because of my background in rugby. There's a country in the world that depresses me, and I'll tell you why. And it should be a beacon, actually. It was called Rhodesia, and now it's called Zimbabwe. It was one of the breadbaskets of all of Africa, and through the absolute treachery, such that would make Fidel Castro even seem tame, Robert Mugabe has destroyed a country, has destroyed a people in that country, and it's an absolutely beautiful land, as I've been told so many times. So the whole story of Zimbabwe is absolutely a worldwide tragedy, and it doesn't get enough play. Not too far away, though, is a beautiful country that I've been privileged to see many, many times, and the spirit and the warmth of the people there, their genuine affection for Americans, and the extraordinary beauty. It's called New Zealand. It's a wonderful place.
That probably makes sense with rugby, right? Big New Zealand. Frank, where would you like least and most?
Well, we were just talking, you know, when you're a ground pounder, you don't get to go to all the garden spots on the planet. So, I've been to over 36 countries on 5 continents, and every one of them has pretty much been an armpit of this world. And I thank God every time I got back on American soil that I was born in the greatest country on the face of this earth, because the rest of the world just doesn't have it as good as we do. The worst country, I've been to Saudi Arabia, the worst country that I've ever seen is Nigeria. They would sell their mother into slavery to make a buck in that country. That's how bad it is over there. It's one of the wealthiest oil-rich countries in Africa, yet their entire population lives in almost total poverty. It is a crime what is going on there. And I spent 3 months in that place. And it was just someplace I do not ever want to go back to. The garden spot, I would probably say Australia, because that's the only continent besides Antarctica, and I don't want to go to Antarctica.
All right, we're back on live. So for our listeners, we're asking the candidates some kind of fun. Where would they like to go least and like to go most? We're on KBUI, 10:30 a.m. The Voice at the CDO High School debate. So Jesse, it's your question. Where would you like to go least and like to go best?
Well, least would be a softball. I would probably normally see Iraq because they were shooting at me there. And we had to go to Thailand one time in the Corps for jungle warfare training. You literally had to sleep in a hammock. By the way, those hammocks are about 5'5" inches long. You had to sleep in a hammock that you tied to a tree, literally that had tiger claws on it. And the reason you had to sleep in that hammock is because if you slept on the ground, you would not see the next morning. And so the very first night I crawl into my 5'5" hammock and I stretch out as best I can and my hammock breaks in the triple canopy jungle in the pitch black. But not to worry, because I'm in the Marine Corps, my darling brothers in arms ran to my aid. Oh, no, they didn't. They all stayed in their hammock and laughed as I stood on the jungle floor in the middle of the night, calling me names as I fumbled around in the dark. And the most is a softball, but Frank said it best. I've been to all kinds of horrible places in this world, and frankly, international travel just frankly doesn't interest me very much because there is nothing like this country. Why would I want to go anywhere else? We have everything I could ever want right here in America.
Let's get back into questions. We're going to shorten the answers a little bit. We're going to get another minute each for each of this, so we can get through a few more of these. This is a lot of fun. We're going to learn a lot about these candidates. Your ballots have arrived in the mail. If you got the early ballots, April 17th is the day to go to the polls. And the winner of the CDA primary will go on to the general election to face Mr. Ron Barber at this point, who's the only Democrat in the race. So next question, and it's for Jesse.
Hi, Jesse. What should the U.S. government's policy be towards the children of illegal immigrants with regards to education, healthcare, and social services?
Well, we constantly get this argument framed this way. It's about the children. It's about the children. It's about our children. It's about the children of the United States of America. And we currently spend $3 billion a year in this state alone to educate, incarcerate, and hospitalize illegal immigration. It's time to stop these problems. It's time to stop letting the left frame it as being about harming children in some way. The truth of the matter is that you should come to this country legally, and once people do that, the most patriotic Americans you will ever meet in your life are those who have come from a horrible place legally and are now the citizens of the United States of America. I was proud to serve with several of them in the Marine Corps, and those people, they all wish they had 10 lives to give for this country because they know how great it is here.
We obviously need to uphold the rule of law, and we need to enforce the laws we have in the books. And when it comes to some of the proposals here, I mean, the proposal to let children here legally serve in the military, last time I checked, there was 100 Americans showing up to their Air Force recruiter asking to join the Air Force, and we would only pick one because we're that competitive, and people are wanting to serve. Americans are wanting to serve. So if we have Americans that want to serve their country, want to put their life on the line, want to get the benefits that come with that if they are able to come home, then we need to preserve that for those that are our citizens and our own people. And we need to enforce the laws that we have in the books in order to ensure that we're upholding the rule of law. Same thing with universities. We have American kids who are trying in universities, and we need to make sure that we're educating them and giving them opportunities in order to get good jobs.
Thank you, Bruce. I think it's time that we have an adult conversation in this country, understanding the fact that when we had the Bush White House, we had both houses of Congress, nothing was done on this issue. Nothing was done during the Clinton administration. During the Bush 1 administration, nothing's being done, anything good anyway, by this administration. So we have to understand that this is a major problem for our country. It continues on, and the longer we let it languish, the more difficult it's going to be. Yes, we are a country, we have rule of law in this country, and we've got a special section that we've allowed reliance on our inability to protect our own border. We have a class of people here with which we have to deal. And the way we have to deal with it is have that discussion in this country. What is the best way to administer a different class of occupancy, for right now that's the word I will use, in the United States, or will they be turned away because they've had a felony or some other problem in their time here? Thank you.
I think the question has to be framed differently. I mean, you know, kids just don't show up on your doorstep by themselves. They just don't show up alone. Somebody brought them here. And I think people need to hold those parents accountable for putting their children in that situation. I mean, if you expose your children to certain risks in this country, you'll be getting a phone call from CPS. You know, there are standards that we have. And to sort of blame the rest of the population for irresponsible parents, I think is, again, a problem that we fundamentally forgot to look at seriously in this country. The kids that are here illegally, it's not their fault. It's their parents' fault. But that doesn't excuse the fact that the parents broke the law. We still have to maintain the laws in this country. We still have to make sure that we enforce it at every level, and it's the parents' fault for breaking the law and dragging their children into that violation of law with them.
Okay. Before we get to the next question, I want to remind everyone there are some snacks up there if you need to take a little break and support the group. You do the straw poll, and it's $2, I think, to put your name against the person that you think is going to win. So let's go to the next question, and this one is for Martha McSally.
Martha, do you support individual taxpayers having write-offs in specific areas? For example, such as mortgage deductions or for charitable donations. What sorts of deductions, if any at all, do you believe are proper and appropriate?
Well, you may have seen my schedule. I actually went to the accountant today to work on my taxes for the year. How many of you guys have done your taxes so far? Man, I'll tell you, the complexity of it is just too much for individual Americans to have to abide by. We spend 6.8 billion man-hours getting our taxes done in America. If we would just turn that time into jobs, that would be over 3 million jobs for Americans. Our tax code at the individual level and at the corporate level is just way too complex. So we have got to simplify it for sure, and we've got to keep it low at the lowest possible level, so we got money in the pockets of Americans so that they can create jobs, so that which by the way increases the revenue that goes back to the government. I mean, it's not rocket science, you know, it increases the economy and the GDP. So we've got to simplify the tax code, individual and corporate. We've got to look at all the deductions, loopholes, whatever it is, but we got to make sure that we then lower the tax rate so that Americans have more money in their pockets and it's easy for them to comply with the tax code.
Thank you. David Sickler.
Our tax code does need to be simplified so that most Americans don't try to hide income. Many Americans try to play this game every year of doing their taxes. A more, not capital F, a more fair system, small f, ladies and gentlemen, would be to have the maximum number of Americans paying the least amount of tax as possible. Now, there have been some times when we've talked about deductions, and it may be time to have this discussion again. I remember in the 1980s when, you might recall, when the mortgage rates were hovering around 22%, 18% prime. Those days are gone. It may be time to be looking at some of the deductions, but again, we need to modernize our tax system, the way we do business in this country, and have as many people pay and share in this paying for the wonderful country that we have inherited. And finally, I would remind everybody, because you're not going to read it on the front page of the paper tomorrow, the United States citizenry, the U.S. citizens, are the most generous people in the history of the world with their own incomes.
Thank you.
If you went to a low, broad tax, where everybody paid a much lower rate and it was spread more evenly across the board, there would be not any need for a lot of these deductions. A lot of these deductions create all this Swiss cheese and it's very complex tax code. It makes a lot of accountants and probably a lot of tax lawyers a little happy. I know, I apologize to the accountants out in the audience out there. I don't want to tap into your livelihood, but it has to be done simpler. A simple little tax form, a one-page tax form where you have your income in there, and then we should allow, I do not believe that the necessities in life should be taxed. Food, clothing, and shelter. I think it's wrong to tax food, clothing, and shelter. But a low, broad-based tax with exemptions for food, clothing, and shelter, and that's it.
Thank you. Justin Keller.
Well, currently our president says things like they passed tax cuts that weren't paid for. Paid for? It's their spending that isn't paid for. That's your money. That's our money. We've earned that money. I just saw another story that there's $1 trillion in tax deductions that the government could get to reduce the deficit. Stop the unnecessary spending to reduce the deficit. Don't once again feast your eyes on the American people's income like some hungry wolf looking for a lamb. The truth of the matter is we need a simpler, low, flat tax. How about a 10% flat taxes? As I've said before, if 10% is good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for the federal government.
This next question is for Dave Sitton. Chris?
Dave, being that much of the important work in Congress gets done in committees, what committee assignments will you seek as a newly elected member of Congress, and why?
It's pretty simple to me. It'd be armed services, and the reason for that, we have 3 incredible assets to protect, not only for our own interest in the district, but also for the United States. First of all, let's start with Fort Huachuca, which has the Cyber Command, as well as intelligence and communications. They have an incredible role in defending this country, and also in securing the economy of Sierra Vista and a great deal of Cochise County. Second, of course, is Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. I've been on the board of directors of the DM-50. I understand I've been through UNPRAC procedures with them. And the other, ladies and gentlemen, is that magnificent 162nd Air Wing of the Air Guard out of Tucson International Airport. One of the things that has not been discussed so far is the city of Tucson owns the airport. The Air Guard is one of the major tenants of that airport. I can't even imagine what TIA would be without the 162nd. Also, I can't imagine what our nation would be without the 162nd. That would be it.
Thank you.
Well, you know, Armed Services Committee, because of the strategic importance of Southern Arizona's bases, whether it's Fort Huachuca, DM, the 162nd Attack Fighter Wing. We also have up in Marana the Apache training facility up there. It is critically important to the region to make sure that we protect those military installations. But the ultimate reason is it's the ultimate job to protect this country, and that's what national defense is all about. My 20 years in the Special Operations Command, being at the tip of the sphere, as we say, of foreign policy, diplomacy, and what the capabilities are necessary to project America's military around the world is something I've done for 20 years. I've got a pretty good idea, and I think it would be vital to be on that committee. But as a second choice, I would choose appropriations because those are the guys that authorize the spending, and you need somebody in there to keep check on all the craziness that people are going to try to stick in on the budget and spend your money. And I'd love to be the guy to be the stopgap for that.
Thank you. Justin Kelly.
Energy and commerce. Truth of the matter is we have an unlimited supply of wealth in this nation. Imagine a United States of America with 3% unemployment, with $2.50 gas, with your power bill, what you pay right now, cut in half. Now that sounds ridiculous, pie in the sky numbers. We have all the supply we need to make that happen and more. Get the EPA out of the way and out of our lives, get the Sierra Club out of our government, and embrace all the energy we are blessed with in this country. A country the size of China has to import their oil. We simply have to look next door and we have ours. It solves the debt, it solves the job problem, it solves everything we need, energy and commerce, to go after the EPA and get the government out of the way and lower these gas prices.
Well, I think as a retired colonel, I would say the Armed Services Committee, and we definitely need more veterans serving on that committee because we have so few veterans, we have staffers just propping them up and they're not providing that oversight we need. But in reality, since I've worked on Capitol Hill, I know what gets things done, and that is the Appropriations Committee. You can authorize something on paper in the Armed Services Committee, but it doesn't get paid for unless it comes out in the appropriations bill. So it is so important if we're trying to fund the things that matter to us as a nation and have fiscal discipline to not fund the things we don't want to fund, you have to be on the Appropriations Committee and you have to know how it works on Capitol Hill, and I've got that experience to do that, to make sure we bring fiscal discipline, fund our defense, protect our local bases here, and not fund the things that are out of control right now that are bringing us and our next generation into debt that's going to be suffocating us. Appropriations is the place to be.
All right. So it's that time for our radio listeners to take another quick break. We'll be back in about 3 minutes.